At the last moment, Joffre ignited her jump jets at full power, cleared the wall, and landed atop the Iluka with both feet. The turning Canopian mech had no chance to regain its balance, taking the full brunt of the Highlander's 90 tons directly on its right arm. The already unbalanced battle mech fell backward and crashed to the ground 2 stories below, unmoving. Balancing carefully on the mech scale catwalk the Iluka had just vacated, Joffre whirled to face off against the Victor Declan had attacked. The Victor's burst of heavy autocannon fire carved a vicious gash just above Joffre's left hip, and then a quartet of SRMs, fired almost as an afterthought, sent a series of small explosions across the Highlander's chest. If her descent from the departing dropship or artful landing had unbalanced the Grey Watch warrior, there was no sign of it. She fired her Highlander's medium lasers and Gauss rifle at the Victor, the well-aimed strikes taking her opponent in the torso. When the final walls fell and the last of the Rimworld's forces were finding their ends across the continents of Terra, Ameris' universe had shrunk to a tiny fraction of its former glory. When he stumbled outside of his palace on September 29, 2779, he stepped under the judging eyes of opponents Ameris had moved mountains to destroy. The usurper had gambled everything, but the cards just refused to turn in his favor, no matter how many chips he sacrificed. But all of that was over now. Looming over the defeated and broken man were 2 battle mechs. The first, an Orion belonging to the venerable General Alexander Kerensky, while the other, standing just a little further back and to the side of the Orion, was a Highlander with its gun arm raised and aimed at the tiny madman. In the mech's command chair was Elizabeth Hazen, a grizzled veteran of a nearly 13-year-long guerrilla campaign on Terra, which had continually stifled and harassed Ameris' forces for the duration of his reign of terror. Only the great respect Hazen had for Kerensky prevented her from firing that Highlander's Gauss rifle into the man who was responsible for nearly wiping out her beloved Blackwatch and for murdering so many thousands of SLDF soldiers. Tossing his pistol at the foot of Kerensky's Orion, Ameris expected swift retribution. Kerensky restrained himself and ordered Ameris be arrested. It was over. The Highlander is a Forrest Gump of battle mechs. I'll pause for a minute for you to absorb the implications of such a heady thesis statement. We good? Alright, let's do this. The Highlander is one of those battle mechs which has a tendency to be on scene when major events take place and become part of humanity's story. It may not always be piloted by the great generals or khans as they forge history, but they're usually nearby. From the Reunification Wars, the Ameris Civil War, from Kerensky's Operation Klondike, and the flowing grain fields of Tukayyid, the Highlander has been there. But why? Why has the Highlander become such a beloved staple and fearsome monolith on the battlefields of the BattleTech universe? Let's see if we can find out. The HGN 732 Highlander debuted in 2592 and was the brainchild of Starcore Industries. The designers envisioned a 90-ton battle mech as a boulder around which a defensive cordon could be designed. While the GM270 fusion engine couldn't push the mech beyond 54 km per hour, the 3 massive Hildco Model 10 jump jets allowed the Highlander to leap up to 90 meters. This provided the mech an unexpected boost to mobility and saw it thrive in terrain where ground speed was limited, particularly within urban environments and rocky terrain. The Highlander's 15.5 tons of Grumman 3 ferrofibrous armor provided 278 points of protection, which maxed out what a 90-ton battle mech could carry. If it was not readily apparent at first sight, these specs left little doubt that Starcore Industries intended this mech to be a solid and hard-to-take-down fighter. Additionally, as designers were looking at armor placement and the engineering of the mech's structure, they took into account the likelihood that the Highlander would face incredible repeated stress due to jump jet use. With that in mind, they reinforced the mech's legs and shifted some additional armor to them as well. The Highlander's 12 standard heatsinks weren't much to crow about, but as a mech that mostly carried missiles and ballistic weaponry, it was not a fatal flaw. The 732's primary weapon was the legendary M7 Gauss rifle located in the right arm. The ability to hammer targets at all ranges with the devastating power of the Gauss slug was intended to give any possible threats as little time to think about their life choices as possible. Backing up the rifle at long range was a Holly 20 long-range missile rack located in the left torso along with 2 tons of ammunition and case. For those keeping score at home, that's a potential 35 damage at long range, 15 of it delivered in pinpoint fashion. Now this doesn't necessarily mean that an opponent of a Highlander is any safer at a closer range. The addition of a Holly 6 short-range missile rack in the left arm, fed by 2 tons of ammunition in the left torso, makes close encounters a memorable experience. Bolstering that fire, a pair of reliable Harman Star-class medium lasers were added to the right torso. These modest energy weapons provided good close-range protection, but also avoided the dreaded fate of ending up weaponless should the Highlander wander too far from logistics lines for too long. He turned to see a pair of mechs in Legion Grey standing side by side, savaging the Barghest with missiles and Gauss rifle slugs. He immediately recognized the pair as McCall's Highlander and Major Devon's captured Cauldronborn. "Are ye all right there, laddie?" McCall's brogue was a most welcome sound in Brewer's ears. "You're looking a wee bit worse for the wear." "I have taken some abuse, Colonel," Brewer said. "I'll be okay if we can convince these party crashers to go home." "Step back and catch your breath a bit. We'll look after these Sonsonach for you." Without another word, McCall turned his mechs full fury against the enemy. The Barghest gave way under the combined fire of the Highlander and the Cauldronborn, but other Ranger mechs came up to take its place. It didn't take long after the Highlanders' announcement for the SLDF to become very interested in procuring as many as Starcorps could produce. Even the notorious curmudgeons at the SLDF Quartermaster Command had to bend and approve of the Highlander as its benefits were deemed worth the additional strain on logistics. When the reunification war ended up being an unexpected challenge for optimistic Star League politicians and war planners, the need for new designs like the Highlander, Lancelot, Pillager, and Stalker was insatiable. Starcorps, along with many other manufacturers, couldn't keep up with the orders, and as quickly as they could be built, dropships full of Highlanders launched to fill the ranks of the SLDF. One of those Highlanders would eventually end up in the possession of Elizabeth Hazen. While not her first battle mech, Hazen would quickly acquire a fondness for it. Normally, I avoid discussing the royal variants just out of principle, but in this case, the Highlander 732B is a key participant in the story, so it's going to be our first variant of the day. Don't let it ruin the rest of them because it has all the bells and whistles. The basic structure of the 732B did not change from the original beyond an upgraded electronics package and swapped to double heatsinks, which allowed for the freeing up of 2 tons of mass with the removal of 2 of the original singles. Both the LRM-20 and the SRM-6 received Artemis IV fire control upgrades to improve their accuracy. When Amaris launched his coup, one of the first targets hit on Terra was the Blackwatch, which was tasked with protecting the Amaris family. Hazen only survived the nuclear hellfire out of coincidence, being off base visiting a sick family member at the time. However, she reacted quickly and rallied the scant survivors of the Blackwatch into a persistently painful Terran resistance. With their knowledge of the local environment, factory complexes, and countless miles of underground tunnels, Hazen's guerrilla campaign was always well supplied and could seemingly strike anywhere they liked at any time. Hazen's Highlanders served her well. It was reported that she was able to use the mech's advanced electronic systems to tap into the Amaris-held satellite network to further coordinate operations on all of Terra's continents. Though Hazen's Highlander suffered significant damage across multiple engagements, it was always quickly repaired and ready for the next fights. As Hazen's legend flourished, the reputation of her Highlander grew with her. Though she would resign her commission after the fall of Amaris, her retirement would be short-lived. When she made the fateful decision to join General Kerensky on his exodus from the Inner Sphere, her Highlander went with her. It was a fearsome presence on the battlefields of the Pentagon Civil War, as well as joining Nicholas Kerensky as Khan of the new Clan Jade Falcons before Operation Klondike. Following Hazen's death, her Highlander was preserved and held in high regard as a valuable artifact of Clan Jade Falcon history. A tradition was started where each subsequent Khan would briefly pilot the Highlander while reciting lines from the Remembrance to honor the life and accomplishments of Elizabeth Hazen. "Now," she commanded again, as she let go a blaze of medium lasers and short-range missiles at a brace of fast-moving hover tanks finally closing to short range. Like the talons of the Jade Falcon they were named for, her hidden force surged out of the water from their left and tore into the flank of the enemy. Completely unprepared and undisciplined, they faltered, and her own force immediately reversed direction and slashed, crushing the remaining battlemechs between their beaks. "For the ghosts of the Black Watch! For Clan Jade Falcon!" she shouted as she kicked out, her Highlander's massive foot destroying a vehicle that dared close to such a distance. Of course, back in the Inner Sphere, the future of the Highlander was impacted by the collapse of the Star League and the decline in technical capabilities of the Succession War states. The fancy ferrofibrous armor plating, the double heat sinks, the Gauss rifles gradually wore out, and replacements were hard to come by. The HGN 733 reflected the first downgrade in the Highlander as constructed by Hollis Incorporated. Most of the battlemech specs didn't change, though it did lose the ferrofibrous armor of the original, which was replaced by 17.5 tons of standard Lang composite plate. Though obviously 2 tons more than the original 732, it did provide equivalent protection. The biggest loss for the 733 was the downgrade from the Gauss rifle to the Mydron Class B heavy AC-10 autocannon in the right arm location. With 2/3 the damage and reduced range, it's hard to argue the 733 didn't lose some of its bite. At least the 2 tons of ammunition provided 20 shots, which at least partially helps improve the Highlander's ammunition situation. Finally, in an often overlooked downgrade, the 733 was no longer protected by case in its side torsos. This definitely created a weak spot in the side for the LRM and SRM and autocannon ammunition waiting for an errant penetrating round to set things off. While it's undeniable that the 733 is a weaker offering in comparison to the 732, I know it still has its fans out there, and that's pretty cool. An alternative option for the Highlander 733 was pieced together in 2866. The HGN 733C went in the other direction with the right arm autocannon. After pulling a ton of SRM and LRM ammunition, an AC-20 autocannon was crammed into the right arm location. The 2 tons of ammunition only provided a limited number of shots, but as anyone who's experienced being hit by one of these rounds, it is going to be memorable. The cost, of course, is a dramatically shorter range, which leaves the 733C with only the LRM-20 as a long and mid-range self-defense weapon. Used selectively and in the proper environment, the 733C could be quite powerful. The same year the 733C debuted, there was also an effort to try and use energy weapons to partially make up for the loss of the Gauss rifle. It also had the side benefit of making the Highlander 733P a little less reliant upon logistics chains for ammunition. The right arm weapon slot held a particle projection cannon, which provided a healthy fraction of the original Gauss rifle's power while being ammo independent. The trade-off, of course, is heat, which was mitigated with a boost to 20 single heat sinks on the mech. This allowed the 733P's Mechwarrior to leap the full 3 hexes, fire the PPC and the LRM-20 while remaining heat neutral. However, things could get dicey at the short range once we bring in the SRM-6 and the medium lasers. At that point, it becomes a trade-off concerning weapon accuracy and the needs of the moment. Overall, the 733P is a fine loadout and perfectly serviceable as a Succession War Highlander. As though dueling one-on-one, the Highlander and Exterminator danced the samba of death, knowing only one would walk away. And regardless of Anduri's skills and superior speed, the outcome hadn't been in doubt from the moment the Highlander materialized from the smoke. A melon-sized Gauss slug finally found its mark, punching into the Exterminator's right shoulder, pulverizing delicate control motors, shredding myomer in the shoulder assembly, and tearing away connectors and the main strut supports. It slowly tore away as Anduri fought to keep the mech upright. Something interesting to note for the Highlander is that it didn't receive the plethora of Helm memory core upgrades that so many other Inner Sphere mechs benefited from in the 3040s and early 3050s. This is partially due to the fact that there weren't a whole lot of Highlanders still around at that point. Starcore and Hollis were still doing limited production runs of the 733, but no more than a few dozen per year. The 2 most notable users of the Noble Battlemech were the Northwind Highlanders and Comstar. Each organization maintained their Star League-era machines throughout the Succession Wars. As it turned out, the Highlander 732s and the Calm Guard were a powerful weapon against the clans, as the mixture of Gauss rifle, jump jets, and thick armor allowed the mech warriors to stand toe-to-toe against many of the clan mechs that came their way. So long as they were well supported and used their agility to avoid being surrounded, the 732 was a good reminder that the clans were not invincible. The Highlander pivoted on its right foot, and then 90 tons of charred metal leapt skyward on powerful jump jets. The flames silenced the screaming soldier. Seconds later, the Calm Guard mech reduced a copse of evergreen saplings to splinters as it settled atop the ridgeline. Its return Gauss shot slammed into the mud a meter from Natasha's direwolf. She slammed her throttle forward and started up the hillside. It wouldn't be until 3060 when the venerable Gauss rifle would return to the Highlander in a new variant. The HGN 736 was similar to the Royal 732B in that it added the Artemis IV fire control system to the LRM-20. However, it shifted gears a bit with a swap to the Streak SRM-4 from the original SRM-6. Finally, an improved C3 computer was added to the right torso. The 736's 10 double heat sinks were more than adequate to keep the mech cool, and the 15.5 tons of ferrofibrous armor were a welcome return to form. Finally, thankfully, the case was also re-added to the left torso to keep the SRM and LRM ammunition safe and cozy. Personally, I'm a big fan of the 736 Highlander, as I think it's pretty darn close to the mech in perfect form. Yes, I'd probably drop the C3 for a little boost elsewhere, but as far as flaws go, the 736 has very few of them. Starting in 3062, the Inner Sphere was introduced to increasingly creative Highlander variants, including the HGN 694, which was an extensive redesign that employed endosteel, a light fusion engine, and reverted back to 17.5 tons of standard plate. In an act that can only be described as the equivalent of taking a sledgehammer to Bernini's statue of David, the 3 jump jets were removed from the Highlander. I know, I was hurt too. Let's just get through this and hopefully we can find the strength to move on. Except for the right arm Gauss rifle, the rest of the original weapons loadout was removed in favor of 2 large lasers installed into the right torso and a heavy Gauss rifle placed into the left torso. 4 tons of ammunition for it provided 16 shots for the massive rifle, which could cause catastrophic damage at short and medium ranges. A full alpha strike from the 694 at short range would do 56 damage, which is modest for an assault mech, but the fact that 25 of it would be guaranteed to hit in a single location, with 15 more in another, is what made the mech a significant threat. While the 694 Highlander does have case on that left torso to prevent complete destruction should the heavy Gauss take a critical hit, the 2 light fusion engine criticals there means that such an explosion would render the Highlander very near death anyway. This risk, combined with the lack of jump jets, make me incredibly wary of taking the 694 out into battle. The other notable variant from 3062 was the HGN 734, which was not quite as radical a departure from the dogma as the 694. It retained the jump jets for the 353 movement profile and had both standard internal structure and 17.5 tons of standard armor plating. The light fusion engine returned to buy mass, and the mech benefited from 14 double heat sinks. The traditional right arm large weapon slot is taken up by an LB-20X autocannon split between the right arm and the right torso, and fed by 3 tons of ammunition held in the left torso. The Highlander's only long-range weaponry was an ER large laser located in the right torso. In the mid-range, a pair of ER medium lasers located in the left arm could be brought into play. At short range, in addition to the LB-20X, a pair of Streak SRM-6s in the left torso packed a possibly devastating punch. Finally, a medium pulse laser located in the center torso could dissuade light mechs from wandering too close and braving that SRM and LBX fire. The 14 double heat sinks are adequate for moderate use of the mech and the weapon systems. Only under alpha strike conditions did the mech warrior really have to worry about heat generation. Laying off the notoriously hot ER large laser goes a long way to rapidly cooling the mech. Overall, the Highlander 734 is a solid entry into the Highlander pantheon. Tune in tight, you dunderheads. Until further notice, I am the acting commanding officer of this unit. I expect that we'll get in as much trouble while my father is gone as we would if he were here. Rock and roll is here to stay. It would be downright irresponsible to make a video of the Highlander and not mention the indomitable Rhonda Snord. Born a clanner and the freeborn daughter of Cranston Snord, shortly before the Wolf's Dragoons began their trek into the Inner Sphere, Rhonda had very little contact with clan culture and practices. The band of misfits that would become an independent mercenary unit known as Snord's Irregulars broke away from the Dragoons and became its own independent entity with the task of finding and procuring lost Star League technology. Rhonda grew up in the environment of a rough-and-tumble mercenary unit, and her sensibilities reflected it. Considered quite wild and willing to take risks in her youth, Rhonda suffered a debilitating physical injury early on in her career which would have left her unable to pilot a mech if not for the advanced technology of the Wolf's Dragoons. Thankfully, or regretfully if you're a Jade Falcon, Rhonda would build a reputation for daring raids and fly-by-night antics. Initially, Rhonda piloted a Shadowhawk, but after the discovery of an SLDF cache, she adopted a Highlander. Painting it in garish pink and augmented with large external speakers, the Highlander she named Heavy Metal earned a reputation for aggressive and agile acts of bravery, usually blaring heavy metal music or classics from Elvis Presley's career. When the invading clans arrived in the Inner Sphere, Rhonda's Irregulars actively participated in the defense of the Inner Sphere, including taking the fight to the Jade Falcons across multiple planets. Usually the Irregulars would come out the winners, collecting clan technology and bondsmen to bolster Rhonda's forces. Rhonda herself would survive the clan invasion years, though her life's thread would be cut with a bombing carried out by the Word of Blake in 3073. Before we move on to our last official variant for the Highlander, we do need to stop and visit the 641X2, which was the result of a Comstar project intended to maximize the capabilities of the Highlander platform. It featured a reinforced internal structure, a 270XL fusion engine, 10 double heatsinks, an XL gyro, and 15 tons of light ferrofibrous armor. All of this weight-saving technology was in service of a litany of weapons systems. The traditional Gauss rifle in the right arm was present, though the missile launchers were swapped out for two multi-missile 7 launchers split between the left arm and left torso. 2 ER medium lasers were added to the right torso along with an Angel ECM suite and a C3 slave unit, which was added to the mech's head. Case 2 was added to the right arm to protect the mech from a Gauss rifle explosion, and another was added to the left torso to keep that MML ammunition warm and cozy. When all was said and done, not even the designers were impressed by the resulting prototype. A Gauss rifle, 2 MML-7s, and 2 ER medium lasers on a battle mech that had so much expense put into maximizing saved tonnage felt bizarrely weak. The mech was tougher thanks to the reinforced structure and the use of Case 2, however it seemed to be countered by the more vulnerable XL engine and XL gyro. My feelings on the 641X2 are summed up from a quote from the project team. The statement reads, "Yeah, they made 10 of these things. Don't ask me why." The further Jerome's mech carried him from the spot on which Nicholas was killed, the more the event kept replaying over and over in his mind, unbidden. The whole thing had happened so fast. In yet another example of the Highlander being present at a turning point in history, the death of Ilkhan Nicholas Kerensky at the hand of Clan Widowmaker Khan Carl Jorgensen in 2834 was caused by a shot from Jorgensen's Clan Tech upgraded Highlander. Jorgensen was in the process of losing a trial in the Circle of Equals concerning the absorption of Clan Widowmaker by Clan Wolf when several Widowmaker mechs stepped forward and violated the Circle's borders. In the resulting chaotic melee, Nicholas Kerensky's Atlas II stepped into the line of fire. An ER large laser shot from Jorgensen's mech hit the Atlas II directly in the head, and the Atlas slumped to the ground. The death of Nicholas spelled the doom for Clan Widowmaker, which was already on borrowed time. The wrath of the clans was unyielding. Khan Jorgensen insisted the death of Kerensky had been an accident all the way up to his execution. While the details of what happened to the Widowmakers is a topic for another day, we do have Jorgensen's modified Highlander as an example of a clan refit of the platform. The Highlander 2C is definitely its own thing, and if you want to know more about that, there's an entire video dedicated to it that you can check out after this one. The Jorgensen Widowmaker refit of the Highlander remained at 90 tons and retained that 353 movement profile. though it did benefit from some clan tech weaponry and 13 double heatsinks. The right arm clan Gauss rifle was the primary threat, though it was backed up by a pair of large lasers split between the left arm and right torso. An LRM-20 aided by an Artemis IV fire control system rounded out the loadout. The combination of 15, 10, and 10 damage along with whatever missiles from the LRM-20 could hit was a pretty powerful setup. And of course, sometimes an unlucky large laser kills your Ilkon and changes history. The last official variant we're going to touch upon today is the HGN 740, and it's the closest we have to an Ilklan variant, as it was first spotted in 3115. It returns to form with a more traditional weapons loadout, yet with some interesting bells and whistles. With a standard structure, standard engine, and 16 tons of light ferrofibrous armor, there aren't any surprises in store structurally. The ERPPC in the right arm is a first for the platform, and in the 740's case it's boosted by the addition of a PPC capacitor. Accenting the mech's long-range capabilities, an LRM-20 aided by Artemis fire control systems makes for a dangerous bite. A Streak SRM-6 on the left arm along with 2 medium lasers installed into the right torso make it closing in on the Highlander a dangerous proposition. Finally, to prevent any of those bothersome infantry or battle-armored menaces from wandering too close, a quad pack of M-pods were split between the left and right legs. The 740's 15 double heatsinks are adequate for the needs of the ERPPC, its capacitor, and jumping and firing the LRM-20. However, anything beyond that will push the mech into the red. Case 2 keeps the mech safe from ammunition explosions, and overall it looks like a very solid, durable version of the Highlander. If you're playing this far down in the timeline, it could be worth a wait in terrified villagers fleeing your bagpipe music. Of course, my unwavering commitment to a bit will not allow us to go without a Mechfrog variant for our beloved Highlander. With the goal of creating something previous variants did not have to offer, the HGN MF was born. Internal items within the mech did not change much from previous designs as it retains a standard fusion engine and internal structure. However, it does have a maxed out 16.5 tons of light ferrofibrous armor and 13 double heatsinks. The Highlander MF's primary weapons are an LB-10X autocannon located in the left torso and a plasma rifle located in the right arm. You're shocked, I know. They're each powerful weapons in the mid and short ranges, and very quickly they're backed up by 2 medium lasers in the right torso to add additional fire. At close range, a Streak SRM-6 can come into play along with the emotional support small laser located in the head. Each of these weapons, except for the Streaks, is aided in their accuracy by a targeting computer located in the right torso. The ammunition for the SRM-6 and the LB-10X is stored in the left arm along with Case 2. Though lacking in any real long-range weaponry, the Highlander MF would be a savvy close-range brawler that's incredibly difficult to take down short of a headshot. As always, the jump jets on the Highlander are the mech's saving grace. If you want to give the MF Highlander a try, I've included a Dropbox link to the record sheet in the video notes below. So why do we love the Highlander? Besides an appealing and rugged appearance, great variants of a solid original loadout, and its tendency to land with a thud on top of smaller battle mechs, rendering their enemies into a fine paste. Personally, I find the connection to the history of the setting to be appealing in a way that extends beyond the usual battle mechs. The Highlander is almost a character of its own, as it shows up in these major historical turning points in the BattleTech universe. From the SLDF to the battlefields of the Succession Wars and beyond, the Highlander has been a mech no one could ignore for long without seriously regretting it. That, I think, is why we love it. Thank you as always for coming by as we talk some BattleTech. If you enjoyed the video and feel it was worthy, don't forget the thumbs up button and even hitting subscribe so you can see more of my nonsense in the future. For those who have taken that extra step of becoming channel members or supported on Ko-Fi, thank you very much. Without you, none of this would be possible. Until we meet again, please take care of yourself and your loved ones by making this world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.